Okay, we'll go ahead and get started. Bon dia. Good. Day one, everybody was like, bon dia. I was like, come on. So it's good. All right. So, according to this, I am Brian Prophet. So I have to have this on. Yeah, what? I'm not? Oh. Can I be you, Leo, please? I need the hat, though, if I'm going to. So, again, my name is Brian Prophet. I am the community manager for the oVirt project. I am also the community manager for something else called Project Atomic, but today I'm going to focus on oVirt. I'm here from the United States. I live near Chicago. People usually ask why, where are you from? So that's where I am. And there's my contact information. We will have information about how to contact the oVirt community at the end of the presentation. So the thing I wanted to talk about today was community. And we've all heard about community in various ways many times. But oVirt is a unique open source and free software project in that it is very mature. And by mature, I mean it has many features. It is very complex. And unlike other projects, it is at times difficult to become involved with. And to help people out, if you have such a project or you have a project that is going that way, I thought it would be useful to explain how oVirt came to pass and be where it is today, and also, how we as a project are, handling this problem. So first, let me make one thing perfectly clear. Free software is awesome, because at times during this presentation you may hear me say something and think, what? He doesn't like free software? He doesn't like open source? No, he likes free software. But it's not perfect like everything else in the world that people do. So sometimes there are problems. So I just want to make that clear right off the hand. Free software is awesome, but sometimes getting it right can be hard. And sometimes more than others. Because no project is perfect. Every project has a problem or two or three or 100. And sometimes we have to deal with that. Now, in this particular case, I want to focus on how projects sort of get to be overly complex. And there's a good kind of complex and a bad kind of complex. Because for me, beginnings matter. So let's take a story that we all know, and let's talk about Linux. Okay, not GNU Linux, the operating system. We're talking about Linux, the kernel. Just so we're clear, we're in kernel space right now. We all know the story. 1991, Linux started small, it started free. It started with the GPL and moved on from there. Linux was built from the ground up. Again, this is not new information. It began with less features, and it has now more features, just as you would expect. It has started small and grown and grown and grown until it is very complex right now. It has had organic, free growth, and it is led by a nurturing gardener. This guy. Well, maybe not nurturing, maybe just a gardener. So, yeah. He's a little grumpy sometimes, so it's all good. All right, so that's Linux. We've heard that story before. Okay, so let me draw a parallel to oVirt. And before I get into the parallels, I know there are a lot of people here who may have heard me speak about oVirt before, but just in case, I'm going to briefly go over what oVirt does, and that will help you understand why it has gotten to where it is today. So, in a nutshell, oVirt is a large-scale, centralized desktop and server virtualization management platform. It is highly scalable. We have built it with leading performance and scalability and security infrastructures, so you can use it for one virtual machine, but usually more than one, up to, I have heard, over 1,000 virtual machines or more. So it is highly scalable. If you are at all familiar with VMware vSphere, oVirt is the open source and free software alternative to that. That's usually the easiest way to explain it. If you've ever seen vSphere, oVirt does that. It is the open source upstream community project for Red Hat Enterprise Virtualization, and also another commercial product that is outside Red Hat, delivered by Wind River, which is an embedded Linux company they're tied in with Intel. So oVirt, a lot of people say, oh, you guys are just working for Red Hat. That's fine. I work for Red Hat. However, oVirt is used at least by one other commercial entity as a commercial product. So we're very happy about that, and we would like to see more. We have a very broad and diverse community. It is exceptionally strong. We are noted for being very good about taking care of user questions and issues. We have an open, excuse me, we have a merit-based open governance model. We took some things from Apache and Eclipse, those foundations, and sort of put them together into a nice, neat governance model that's split between our main board and all of the individual projects within oVirt. We have many projects under the oVirt brand, and I will give you a picture of them right now. So these are just some of them. Now this is oVirt. This is a very complex piece of architecture here. Each one of those, VDSM, storage, engine, node, it goes on and on. Those are all separate projects within the oVirt umbrella. There are others from partners such as Kimchi and Mom, which add functionality to oVirt, which are not shown here. And those come from outside, places outside Red Hat. So we are very happy to bring in outside, contributions. But it's a challenge. Because when you are new, this is what I mean by mature. When you are a new developer or you are a small company and you say, oVirt is great, but I think it needs this. You have to kind of come in and look at this and all the code and all the infrastructure that goes along with this, and you have to figure out how exactly do I get my feature into oVirt. And I want to emphasize, oVirt never turns anyone away. We love to have people come in, but we also know it is not the easiest thing to learn. And this is our problem. Even if you break it down, so we have the engine, it's a JBoss-based Java application. It talks to our hypervisor nodes. It manages the VM cycle. Excuse me, there are several ways in. As you can see, you can use the REST API, you can use the command line interface, you can use a Python-based SDK. And then, of course, we have a web-based administrative and a web-based user portal as well. So there are lots of ways to get in there and talk to the engine. We also have the node, which is a standalone hypervisor. It can either be run as a minimal install of Fedora or CentOS, very small footprint, just enough to run virtual machines, or you can use the node as a full hypervisor host. And then finally we have storage, and we have lots of storage options. We have Fiber Channel, NFS, iSCSI. We can use POSIX-based storage, which means we can plug into Gluster, which is really nice to have, and we can do, we're actually we are very good management interface for Gluster. So people don't usually realize that, but if you want to manage your Gluster instances and images, you can use oVirt to do that, which is actually kind of nice. So there's a lot of functionality there. So that, coming back around, we knew about Linux, what that was, because that's pretty obvious. That is oVirt, the Virtual Data Center Management Platform. Like any other software, it started small, but it did not start open. It actually started as closed source proprietary software. Like Linux, it was built from the ground up. First, it started in Python, and then it became, in the engine, it was written in C#. I'll get to that in a second. Like all other software, it started with less features and got more features. It grew and became more complex. It too had organic growth, but it was closed growth, because when oVirt first started, it was led by a commercial entity, not a free software community. Then it was opened and freed. And this is where we come to today. So now, because I'm a nerd, I read comic books. So everything's about Spider-Man and Superman, and everybody's got a secret origin. Well, guess what, ladies and gentlemen? Now I tell you the secret origin of oVirt. I wish I had a cape. It'd be like, boom. Maybe Red Hat will buy that for me. I don't know. So let's go back to 2007. That's when oVirt got it started at a company called Qumranet, which is based in Israel. It started in late 2007 as a Python application, and all it did was manage KVM virtual machines. And that's pretty much what it did. Now, and it did a pretty good job and stayed that way as a Windows-based .NET application. So as functionality was added, it started as Python, but we had .NET code added on top of this. oVirt was not a Linux platform. oVirt ran on Windows. It was purely made in .NET. Okay. So in 2009, thereabouts, Red Hat purchased Qumranet. Okay. And two things happened. Immediately, the Qumranet product was rebranded as Red Hat Enterprise Virtualization 2. And the code that would become oVirt was technically called oVirt 2. So it went from oVirt 1 became Rev 2, and oVirt 2 basically disappeared. It never existed. There is no oVirt 2.0. Because for a while, and this is very strange and very unusual for a company like Red Hat, who firmly believes in free and open source software, for a while, Rev 2.0 was a purely proprietary, only runs on Windows product. That was not good at all. But here's, and that's where we got to at this point. So that was Rev at 2009. But here's what was going to happen. While Rev was out being sold by Red Hat, oVirt went into a cocoon, or a chrysalis, as we say. It disappeared. It was still, there was no live version of it anywhere. It was all in-house, in the project. And what it was doing was undergoing a great metamorphosis, okay, which took 2 years. So now we're up to 2011. So for 2 years, there was no public release of oVirt, just the commercial Rev release. I told you it was a secret origin. And not a lot of people knew this. Okay, so at that point, during those 2 years, there was a big change, because then in 2011, we saw oVirt 3.0. And now what happened was, under the hood, the engine, the oVirt engine that was originally written in C# and was .NET based, was moved over to Java. We added Spice functionality, so you could see virtual machines inside Firefox. And pretty much all of the code in those 2 years went over to 100% free and open source software. And then finally began to run on Linux. Specifically Red Hat Linux, Red Hat Enterprise Linux, CentOS, and Fedora, depending on what flavor you wanted to pick. So out of the cocoon, now we have a beautiful, free, and open butterfly. Okay? But that should be the ending, but it wasn't, because a lot of things have to change. You can't just wave a wand and say, I want everything to be open. No, that never works. If anybody is familiar with the old Star Office, proprietary office suite that came from Germany, they were bought by Sun, who used it as Star Office for a little while and changed it to Open Office. And then, of course, later on, Oracle came along, and now we have Open Office and LibreOffice. Okay, Star Office had the same exact problem, and it took, I believe, 3 years for them to go from proprietary to open, for exactly the same problems that we had at oVirt. So what had to change? Why can't you just wave a magic wand and say, here's the code? Well, historically, the number one reason why this can't happen is that when you write proprietary software, you're usually writing it in proprietary tools or proprietary build environments. This is actually the number one reason why you can't just throw out the code on a repository somewhere and say, here you go. It doesn't work like that. These tools do not use standards, usually. They're very efficient, and they're very good at what they do for getting people within a company to build the same kind of code, but they may be relying on standards that have nothing to do with industry standards and using things that have nothing to do with broader software standards. Another big problem is that typically these proprietary source code will have, hooks into proprietary third-party libraries. And those libraries, you can't include those in your open source code. So you've got to get all your code that can be built with GNU or GCC or whatever and recompiled there. But if your libraries are proprietary, now you've got to find equivalent libraries somewhere else. So that's a big problem as well. This takes a lot of time and effort because you're doing a lot of ripping and replacing, and you may have to really write your own open source libraries at that point. Another reason why, when people write proprietary code, on average, there are usually bad security practices, more so than you will find in open source. Now, I'm going to be honest with you. I'm not going to be the guy that stands up here and says, oh, it's open source, it must always be secure. Heartbleed. No, that doesn't happen. Okay, but I would say, and I would argue, that on average, because it's open, because you have a chance for more people to see the code, it goes back to what Linus Torvalds always says, many eyes make shallow bugs. You do have better security practices in open source code and free software than you do in proprietary code. So when you go in and make your code from proprietary to open, you've got to re-examine it and get a lot of those bad security practices, out of there, all the bugs and things like that. The other thing that you've got to go in there and weed out are bad coding practices. Okay? People take shortcuts all the time, especially when nobody's really looking at what they're doing. I've written this module. Here it is. It does X, Y, and Z. Well, how did you do that? Who cares? It works. Let's go. You can't do that in an open source project because whatever you're doing to do X, Y, and Z may affect, features A, B, and C on the other side. So you have to make sure everything works together. So again, you've got to go through all of that proprietary code and all the shortcuts and all of the, little tricks that the developers might have done have to be built on standards and good practices. Another thing that had to change with oVirt was the mentality of the people themselves. Now, this is actually a real thing. When you have developers who are very focused on building a commercial product, they're going to be very feature-oriented, they're going to be very deadline-oriented, they're going to be very focused on delivering software that is good, hopefully, but also software that will sell. Okay? And that seems like a very small point, but it actually makes a difference. Because one of the problems that we see in Red Hat and in other places around the open source community is that commercial companies that get switched over to free and open source software tend to resist for a while. They don't understand, why do I have to talk to community? I've been doing it myself. We've been doing it with my team right here for years. Why do we have to change? They don't understand why community input is important. Now, I believe, this is my theory, and some people agree and some people don't agree with this. My theory is that the 2 years that oVirt went dark, from 2009 to 2011, actually made a big difference here. Because a majority of the oVirt team, there are some people here today, but a majority of them are based still with that Israeli company, Qumranet, and they're still in Israel. And, I go and visit them occasionally, and they are very keen now on being involved with community. They are very interested in community. They want to be involved in community. They just sort of don't know how yet, but they're learning very quickly. I have never had anyone on the oVirt team if I ask them, hey, can you do this as part of a community effort? No one has ever told me no yet, and that's good. I think that the 2 years that they were working so hard to get that code changed over helped them understand why all these things, all this standards, all this community stuff made sense. So I believe that they were also a big thing that changed at the end of the day when oVirt, became open source in 2011. So that, basically they did it. Okay? oVirt is open. It is free, it's there, it's ready to go, and you can contribute it. But what was sort of left behind? Well, what was left behind was that very complex architecture that I showed you earlier. the one that says, it's not easy to get involved in this project. It's not that people are turning you away, it's that you have to learn so much to get involved. It's a very steep learning curve. So this is our challenge as the oVirt community, and this is what we are really trying to address. So how do we do that? How do we get people to connect to a community and a project that is complex and mature? There are a lot of features in oVirt. There will be more features later on. But as we grow, it is becoming harder and harder for people to get what they want into oVirt because we have a very well-established roadmap. We are going in a certain direction. If people want to add their stuff, they can, certainly, but they're going to have to put a lot of effort into doing that. So the first thing we're doing is we're spreading the word about oVirt. And that doesn't mean just people like me coming out and talking, okay? We are making sure that people know about oVirt at all levels, and we are very engaged in building a broader user community. Now that might not seem intuitively wise when you think about it. Why aren't we looking for more developers? Because surely every open source project needs more developers. This is true. But our problem is we need more users at this point than we need developers. We need people using this platform and really working it hard and putting it into production and finding out what works and what doesn't and really just, beat that thing down, okay? As we grow our user base, people get more engaged with oVirt, and then we get more of the, hey, I love this stuff, but I really wish it would do this. That's when you start, by natural attrition, to grow your developer community, which is ultimately what we want to do. But we're doing it to build the user community. So how do we do that? What are the specifics? Number one, we make the software easier to use. When I came to the oVirt project 6 months ago, the number one thing I heard from people outside of the project and inside of the project too was that oVirt was awesome when you got it working. Once you got it installed and configured, oVirt was wonderful. People loved it. But to get it installed and working was really hard. Actually, there were usually some bad words that were said when people described the process, but I'm going to be polite and not share those bad words, okay? That's what we had. And you have to be honest with yourself. This was something that oVirt had a problem with. So what we are doing now is making that process a lot easier. So before I started working with oVirt, I'd say for the last year or so, the oVirt team has wisely started making it easier to configure and install oVirt. From the community side, what we do in the community side is we build infrastructure around that. It's one thing to just hand people awesome software and say, go, use. Yeah, that doesn't always work. What you have to also do is build good documentation. You have to have ways that you can make it easier to talk to your community. We have to make things as collaborative as possible on all levels. And that is also what we're going to be doing as well. It's all part of lowering the barrier to entry. Right now, well, let's say a year ago, the barrier to entry for oVirt was pretty high. Now I would say it's down here. When as we keep going and we're working with the community and we're working with the engineers and everybody involved, we want to get that down to here. We don't want to make it hard for people to use oVirt. They still may not like it. You can't build software that everybody likes all the time. But we don't want to have the excuse be, I can't install it, it's too hard to use. That's not a good reason. We want people to be able to look it over and see if it works for them. We think it will, but even if it doesn't, it's not good to have, it won't be because they couldn't get in. So number 2, this is the other thing that we are doing to make it easier for people. We have the wall here, it was here, it's still a wall. Even when it's down here, it's still a wall. So what do? You make a hole in the wall. You build a door. You build more doors. As I've said repeatedly through this conversation, oVirt is very complex. It's very mature, lots of features, blah, blah, blah. We got that. Okay, I made that point clear. So, but there are other ways to get in there. One of them is that REST API I mentioned earlier. Okay, so what people right now have the ability to take the feature they want and plug it into that REST API. So what we're going to do is emphasize that. We're building a part of our website will have an API showcase. Not really a marketplace, because marketplace implies sales, and that's commercial, and we are not commercial. But we are going to have a showcase. So if you want to build a plugin, for instance, NetApp, which is one of our partners, has a plugin for their software. Now, right now, that plugin is hosted over on NetApp's site, because in order to use this plugin, you have to be a registered NetApp user. It has nothing to do with oVirt being free or not free. It's because you can't use it if you're not a NetApp customer. That's just the way they've done it. So we are talking to them about, hey, can we also host that over on our new showcase? Because that would be helpful, because it would be easier for oVirt users to find it. And they're probably going to let us do that because, again, it doesn't matter where it is, because you still have to be a registered NetApp user to do that. That's just one example of many that we're trying to build. And when we have that, that's going to lower the barrier to entry for developers and get more doors built into the oVirt project. So you can still contribute to the core. We are not saying you can't come in and contribute to the core. If you want to do that, you are very welcome to. But if you don't feel like learning that huge, steep learning curve, then you don't necessarily have to. There are other ways that you can come in, get the feature you want, and oh, by the way, you can share it with other people. You know, NetApp is not the best example because they're probably not going to share that with other people. But we're hoping that other developers will build things that can be shared with other users of oVirt. So, how's it been going so far? And I would say, and I will not take full credit for this because this was happening before I started, but in the last year that we've made an active effort to lower that barrier to entry, we have seen an increase of our emailing list activity, about 46%. We're getting around anywhere from 2,000 to 3,000 messages on our mailing list per month from about 200 people per month, and that is growing. Every month it is bigger and bigger. We are seeing enormous traction of oVirt users in all sorts of organizations, whether they are small businesses, whether they are large enterprise companies, hosting companies, colleges and universities like oVirt because it's a good fit for them. So I have people like here at Fisl, and also a couple weeks ago at Red Hat Summit, they were like, oh yeah, does anybody actually use this in production? Oh yeah, they do, quite a bit. I mentioned earlier that we've seen scalability up to 1,000 virtual machines. I mentioned this earlier this week in another talk, There's a German hosting provider that uses oVirt in production right now. They manage 1,100 virtual machines for their customers using about 60 hypervisor nodes. The Brussels Airport Company, we just posted a new case study on our website earlier this week. That airport uses oVirt. They are migrating almost all of their VMware virtual machines from VMware over to oVirt. Not all of them. They can't do all of them because some of their customers they want to stay with VMware. Well, okay, they have to do what's right by their customers. Everything else is going to oVirt. This is an airport. They do not have time for software that is going to break. Okay? That would be catastrophically bad. So these are things that we are seeing now. As I mentioned, Red Hat is not the only commercial user of oVirt. Wind River has their Wind River Open Virtualization product that is based purely on oVirt. I just found out 2 days ago, and I have to go talk to them and find out, that the American cable channel, the Discovery channel, is apparently using oVirt as well in their environment to host all of their different website environments. Now I got to go talk to them and say, hey, what you guys doing? So that's part of my job, is to find all these new users and say, hey, tell us more. What works, what doesn't work. And by the way, if any of you ever want to try oVirt, I'll tell you how to do that in a little bit. If you try oVirt and you don't like it, please tell us why, because I want to know. It is not all rainbows and sunshine fairies in open source. It's going to break or not do something you don't want it to, that you don't want. We need to know these things. So feedback is very important. I'm just telling you the good stuff now because it looks good, but we understand there are going to be problems, so we want the feedback. We have made some good strides with outside partners. Things are going pretty good so far. As I mentioned, IBM has come along. They've contributed things like Kimchi, our mom project. Also, they've helped get Debian support within oVirt. NetApp, as I mentioned, they have that plugin for their storage technology. HP, they're a big user of oVirt. They built some UI plugins that they want to see that sort of matches the UI they have in-house. They're also helping us take the OpenStack Nova project and integrate that within the oVirt engine. Symantec is involved. So it's not just Red Hat. We've got big players that are coming in, and we're looking for individual developers to come in and work with us as well. So, to sum up, where are we going from here? Right now, we're going to formalize our partnership program. We're going to make it easier so that if you are a commercial entity and you want to come in and get involved in the oVirt project, we're going to make it so you know clearly who do you need to talk to, what do you need to talk about, and how do we get started. Go, go, go. And then, as I mentioned, that API showcase, which we're going to start, we're actually starting to work on now, and hopefully will be implemented by, I'm hoping, your spring, sometime in October and November. So hopefully that will get going. So we'll see. So, and of course, we're looking for more users, always more users. So that's important too. So with that, I am done boring you to tears. And I would ask you to have questions, and if you need someone to help you, if you're not comfortable with English, roll it by these guys down here because they'll translate it for you, and so don't feel bad about that. So any questions from the group? Oh, it's quiet. Nothing?
Okay, you mentioned about the feedback from community, and how can one do that? I mean, do you have some kind of form on the website so people can just go there?
We don't have a formal form. I mean, we do tap
survey.
we do tap into Bugzilla and whatnot.
I
so
see.
we've got that.
Yeah.
But the main things is, and that's a good reminder for me. I should have pointed this out. So we have our website. We're very active on IRC on the OF2C service. So the oVirt channel there. Our users mailing list is very popular. So you can go to the oVirt website and find the links to subscribe to the oVirt mailing list. The users one is very popular. And then finally, we're on Twitter at oVirt. And also we're on Facebook, which I don't have on the slide. So there's lots of different ways. Getting to what you're saying, one of the things I didn't mention this in the talk because I thought it was a little cosmetic, but it is sort of germane to this question. We're not only going to have that API showcase, but right now our website, it's based on MediaWiki, and it's okay, but MediaWiki has problems, especially when it comes to maintaining documentation and whatnot. So we're going to shift over to something that will be as collaborative as a wiki, but the source code and the content will be based in GitHub. And then we will be able to let users update parts of the site, but we will have better source control. And one of the features that we're going to add now is a feedback form too that will plug straight into Bugzilla. Because right now we just have a link that says, if you've got a problem, go to Bugzilla. I want to make that more obvious to people. So it still goes to Bugzilla because that's where it needs to go, but it'll be more obvious. So thank you for that question. Anything else? All right. Well, I thank you all very much. I've had a wonderful time at my first Fisl. It's been awesome to meet everybody here. Brazil is a wonderful place. And so I've been very happy to come. And with that, I am done yakking. So have a great day. See you later.